Welcome and thanks for joining us. My guest today is Ron Nielsen. He's the Executive Vice President of Looking Glass. And Ron, good to have you with us. Let's start with the big topic today of threat hunting, given the rapidly changing and ever more scary cyber threat situation the country, the government seems to find itself in. Threat hunting is really becoming top of mind and the activity is evolving. So tell us what you see about it.
Well, Tom, I think you're exactly correct, and you don't need to look any further than to see some of the U.S. stories of interest, like the Colonial Pipeline or JBS or water treatment facilities and things like this. Our adversaries have found ways to conduct business, and it's breaching now into our everyday lives. And so, one of the techniques that was developed in threat hunt in the government many years ago was to use forensic data to go after these adversaries where maybe malware isn't even present. So it's an emerging defensive measure that cybersecurity is focusing upon.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned that it may not even be the cyber threat embedded in your system, but it threatens the system. I mean, in the case of the Colonial Pipeline, it wasn't the SCADA system operating the pipeline that was affected. It was their business systems, but they worried what could happen. So there's kind of an offset to the threat, and in some sense, a multiplying of it because you do have multiple systems. Fair way to characterize it?
Well, absolutely correct. So the interdependencies we've developed using digital systems, so compute systems, then they've provided great efficiencies to business. Remote access, remote maintenance, monitoring, distance monitoring, safety enrichment, and enhancements for performance. I mean, there's so many advances that we've done in the days with IT, but the dependency that that now brings for cybersecurity to secure those functions that we've now adopted as normal haven't really kept pace. Our defense of those systems and that interactivity isn't well, it's not mature yet.
Got it. And so, what does threat hunting? What are the activities that make it up nowadays? Then, in terms of the point of view of a network administrator or a network operations center or a cyber operations center, and maybe we can talk about the convergence of those two, afterwards. But tell
Mhm.
us what you see as the main components of a threat hunting program.
Well, I think a good friend of mine, Dmitry Alperovich, formerly of CrowdStrike, he was really innovative. And in technology, we utilize forensic data. So we look at past exploits and then what I call residue. And when you have a really good adversary, they try to clean up after themselves, right? I mean, they're almost better at IT management and efficiencies than some of our IT teams. And so they may compromise your system and you not know it. So you don't detect the breach event. If you can't then find residue in your systems, in your architecture, in your networks, you can't ferret it out until something nefarious occurs. I mean, something dramatic. And so the concept of threat hunting initially was founded on taking this residue, these indicators of compromise or malware or command and control, and ensuring that any of those indicators found in your system would be something you'd pursue, right? There was no malware, there was no system hack, but they're in your system, right? They have ownership, they have presence. And so it was to find them and root them out of your system. I think that's a good focus. If people have the skills and they have the data, they can be successful at it. But I think adversaries have changed, as you said. We talked about, well, a couple of events. Florida water treatment, there was no malware, there's no residue. When we talk about solar winds, there's no residue. There's no forensic predeterminate data. So hunting in that is blind hunting. I don't know if that's very effective. So we have to find a way again. Adversaries had a capability, we modified our defenses. They modified their attacks. We have to now modify threat hunt and mature it. I think that's where we really need to go in the next year or so.
So if there's no residue, that doesn't mean there isn't necessarily a piece of code that is in latent mode, though, somewhere on your network.
To Todd, to be very clear, it's not even latent. SolarWinds was an active, intrusion, but the intrusion didn't involve malware. It involved really intelligence gathering capabilities and the exfiltration or the collection of intelligence information by the adversary. So yes, your hacker residue, that malware residue didn't exist. But the residue that was left is why is this data going into this new place? And why is so much data going to this new place? Again, your antivirus can't stop that. Your boundary defense can't stop that. None of the tools that we've instrumented in our networks are wise to this. It's the pursuit of an anomalous communication, not a nefarious one. You cannot prove it's nefarious until you investigate it. That's where a threat hunt really could show a lot of value.
Yes, and that really turns the classic way of looking at it on its head in a way, because we're so used to this idea of the residue or looking for that small piece of code that's latent or something that's manifest, as you point out, residue. So does this mean that only after the compromise is launched that you can do anything about it?
No, no. So interestingly enough, we've named a few events here in the US that are kind of recent this year. Um, there's a cybersecurity and hacking is a business now. And there are people around the globe that conduct business, and their business transactions also leaves residue. It's not digital like hacker tool residue. It's it's a supply chain of information on their intentions, their capabilities, and their targeting. Further, some of the adversaries actually, well, they sell their access. So again, these are not what I call on-net indicators. These are off-net. They're not on your network, but they're occurring in the digital information space, and they can be discoverable. The question is do you adopt an intelligence program that's, again, not on network? It's trying to piece together these pieces of information and take actions that are preemptive instead of post activity. And I think there's a strength there. We have data, we have indicators, again, not technical ones, but indications that a group wants to hack into healthcare, or they want to hack into the oil and gas industry or water treatment. And we know they have a motive and an intention. And we also understand very clearly the tools and capabilities, their tactics, their techniques, and the procedures they use, which is their tradecraft. If we took that information and now applied it to hunt, now you're looking for things that you should expect to see from that adversary targeting your sector. And there's a lot of value in it, and it's exponential. So it doesn't just help one company in oil and gas, it could help all of them. We just need to start instrumenting what I would say is digital intelligence and present it to the mission operations teams so they can use it for awareness. They can use it in actually having indicators that are on not seen yet, but known. It's an emergent field. I think we can do well.
In many ways, it almost sounds like the approach that intelligence took in the Cold War, where trying to ascertain what, say, the Soviet Union's intentions might be. And there was no manifest document that stated what they were going to do, no residue. And yet you had human intelligence and to some degree signals intelligence. It's almost an adaptation in the 21st century of that way of thinking.
Well, it is. I actually, little sign here in the back, but I spent a couple of years, almost 13, in Europe, and I was actually stationed there in the Cold War. And we used every form of intelligence that was available to us to try to discern the intentions and the capabilities of our adversaries. And so whether it was HUMINT, electronic intelligence, FODINT, ELINT, SIGINT, we took any intelligence that had matured. And I guess that's what I'm saying, Tom. We need to mature this digital preemptive forensic intelligence and then reapply it to our hunting mission on network. And we haven't matured there yet. I think we're close and we're seeing value, but we need to push it into it like a real discipline, Tom. You've got to practice your tradecraft. And so this is a discipline. It is something new, but you're 100% correct. This is the Cold War. It's just a different terrain map, if you will.
And that leads to two questions. And the first one is, what are the particular skills that are needed to move into the agencies to augment the people that are used to looking for things that antivirus, would detect, the malware hunters, the classical approach people?
Well, it's a couple of things, and some of them are not really a technical maturity or an education that people need. Policy in the U.S. government. Some of these communications are, well, they're targeting the commercial sector. Does the federal government really have a role in monitoring or creating an environment where they're considering, company ABC? No, I don't mean, if there is a company, there probably is an ABC. Not talking about any specific company. So we have to find the ability to understand how the government or third parties can help in this business space. And I say that more importantly because maybe the Fortune 100s can afford it and they can hire the right talent. And maybe the mid tiers could hire the right talent. There isn't enough talent. We've known this in cyber for a long duration, and we're not going to change that right away. So we need to find a way to actually coalesce. And I think, like I said earlier, the efficiencies that we can run this to scale by sector would be where we could try to go. So it's really intelligence. People join the Army. When I joined the Army, I was in intelligence programs. I didn't have any background. I came out of high school. I was working in a lumberyard. You can teach this skill. You really can. And it's just basic intelligence. It's puzzle solving. It's curiosity we need, right? Because it's not black and white. It's a gray space where it's a new trade. And we need people that are entrepreneurs and innovators to develop this preemptive digital hunting mission. But I think we will need some government policy. We'll need some government leadership and guidance, as a community. And we're starting to see that at CISA and in the DoD as well. So again, hopeful times that we can pull this together. I think the imperative has been, accepted by the community now with things like Colonial and SolarWinds, the Microsoft Exchange hack. This affected millions and millions of people. It's something I think we're mature to now. We didn't think it would go this far, but adversaries are a little bit more emboldened.
Sure. And my second question then is, what are these sources of information? It sounds like it could be expensive, as you indicated, for a single entity to try to keep on top of the threat environment in the way we've described it. And so how can a organization get at that information? And is there any kind of sources that do that roll up and consolidation that you can perhaps get as a service?
Well, that's a high quality question, and I think could be helpful. The answer is yes. There are groups such as MITRE, CISA, EMISP in the European Union. The CISA broadcasts and reports their data sharing activities. That information is free to anyone. That's free to any company. So the acquisition is really the only impediment to acquisition is lacking the question. You have to ask for it to receive it. So there's a wide swath of information. Now, where might you see a deficiency? The company that acquires the information, CBA, ABC, whatever the name of the company is, may not have the technical manpower to understand it or to extract value from it, right? To apply it to their mission in their company. There are some commercial firms that do help support these activities. But again, I think the government has been very vocal looking for public-private partnership. I think if companies would step forward and offer a little bit of time to participate, they could help mature this mission. But you need active participation. And I would think out of the hundreds of thousands of companies we have, there would be some that would step forward.
Lots of agencies still use endpoint activity. They look at systems logs. Is there anything in those sets of information, those kind of technical sets of information, that could be indicators of threat in the sense that the
Yeah.
wider look at the threat environment outside there is? Can that be combined, the information you described, with this very technical and regularly occurring sets of data that organizations are used to gathering?
So there is, but Tom, I'll go back to what we were talking about earlier. And I'm I guess, a couple of decades doing this. The average amount of time that an adversary sits on a network before they're exposed is still over 9 months. And one of the first tactics that I was ever taught of is, once you access the system and you've compromised it, clean up the logs, clean up your residue, and hide all traces that you got there. That was one. And the second one is patch the system that you hacked so no one else can hack in and steal your territory. So again, the adversary, we used to call it technical assistance visits, remote. But you'd go in and you'd compromise a system, then you'd remove all trace of your existence, and you'd clean up the system so it couldn't be hacked again. And then you'd sit on it. So the forensic data can help. The residue can help. Most hack tools will try to self-clean, but they won't clean everything. There'll be a registry key, or there'll be something that's left. Or if they have remote logging set up for endpoints, that's another effective way. But more often than not, again, I think the difficulty is, a human to do it is almost impossible. You'd have to run like AI or ML against the data set to have a cost efficient method to find that residue. It's possible. It's very easy to do if you have that data repository that you can search with ML.
So I guess, to bring this all around, then you really need three instruments, to make an analogy, in order to do effective threat hunting and have effective cyber security assurance to any degree. You need a microscope, you need a telescope, and you need a wide area antenna.
Well, what we talk about is, we start with the outside in view, which is a digital one. We monitor every internet connection on the globe. And then we look at an adversarial. So who's the actor? So who's the participant, right? The uninvited participant. And then you pull both of those together. We call it attack surface monitoring. But we use those other off-net digital indicators and make sure that those are part of your algorithms to search your own data, search your connectivity, search your machine's performance anomalies, and what we call command and control. When do you reach out to a new server that you've never reached out to before, and why'd you do it? I mean, so these are not, again, maybe hard science forensic, but all these are available to everyone. The attack surface management's available. Global threat intelligence is available. Now, these are matured disciplines that I think any company could gain benefit from.
All right. Well, we want to thank you then for that great insight. And maybe it's time to get started on that inside look. I said three instruments. Maybe I should add a fourth. You need a mirror to your organization to get that good outside look in. Ron Nielsen is the Executive Vice President of Looking Glass. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Tom.
And I'm Tom Temin. For more on this discussion, please visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search Looking Glass.